we could start shooting Found, we had to shoot a couple of movies within the movies, Deep Dwellers and Headless. Deep Dwellers is a kind of a throwback to those old 60s, 70s atomic age monster movies, sort of a mixture between Creature from the Black Lagoon and Humanoids from the Deep. And Headless is more of a tribute to those really bloody 80s slasher movies that are a lot of fun. And basically the way they fit into the film Found is that the main character, Marty, he and his best friend David decide they're going to watch horror movies together.
Didn't really realize what I was getting myself into, and once I realized what I had to do, I went with it. But it was a very, very hard experience to be in this deep, cold, freezing lake water, and I had this big 60s wig on that was very heavy, and when we had to go tread in water and we had shoes on which were weighing us down anyway, and then my wig would get wet and it would pull my head down, and I got water in my mouth so many times, and we're trying to stay afloat and have this romantic moment, and it was so not romantic, and it was so scary and horrifying, and we had to do it over and over again to get it just right. And just the hiking through woods and mud, and it was raining and the weather wasn't the greatest, and it was fun. It was cheesy. It was a great time, but it was definitely uncomfortable.
I first saw Angela in Roses, A Gormans, which was directed by Arthur Cullifer, who is my friend and did the makeup for Found. And I remembered Angela from that, and I kept her in mind. And when we actually started casting Found, Angela was the first person that we cast because I wanted her in Deep Dwellers and Headless as the woman doing all of the stereotypical woman in horror victim things, being the sex pot in Deep Dwellers, and then being murdered in Headless.
It was really intense having to go to a dark place and get worked up and be hysterical and play the victim and whatnot. So that's kind of what I bring up inside myself to get myself worked up, to get to that point where I start getting emotional and feeling that is, and take myself back. Not too far back where it gets crazy, but just enough where it brings up those emotions and those feelings that triggers it. And once I get that going, then it's just easier to kind of get lost in that character. And I have to block out everyone else around me and pretend like they don't exist and go inside myself to bring that out. So that's how I do that part.
With a part like Angela's in Headless, I don't think women in horror films and those particular kinds of roles get enough credit because people make fun of the woman who's always running away from the monster or the killer and falling down. But do you know how hard it is to run around screaming at the top of your lungs, hyperventilating all day long? It's hard. And she had to scream for about maybe 8 hours or more on the day that we shot with her on Headless. And she had to die, she had to cry. It was a brutal, brutal job, and all she needed was a little bit of time in between shots to work herself up, because I didn't even ask her for real tears, but she insisted on giving them to me. And all we had to do was just be quiet for maybe a minute, and she'd just sit there until it came, and then she'd signal for us, and then we'd call action. Action.
No.
One of the greatest pleasures I had in shooting this entire film, Found proper, the movies within the movies, everything, was getting to see Shane Beasley play the Headless Killer. He brought it. He brought it to that role. He sold it. It was amazing. And it was a really disturbing performance. And I think that his performance brought a lot to our film.
I actually held back a little bit because Miss Angela's boyfriend at the time was there, and even though he was only 20 feet away, I could still feel his breath on the back of my neck. So as I'm doing all of this fun moving around and like getting ready to like stab her and just rip her to shreds, all I could think of was, don't touch her boobs. Don't touch her boobs. You're getting too close.
Shane's physical movement is really interesting. He really got into the mannerisms, gave the killer a distinct physical personality. And the way he would torment the women was all improvised for the most part. He made a lot of that up on the fly. He did a lot of the choreography. We just kind of followed him around. And then I think the thing that impressed me the most was when you ask an actor to do something really vulnerable like he does with the severed head in the tunnel underground, which you'll have to see the movie to see what he's doing with the severed head in the tunnel underground. But man, Shane went to town and committed, and there is horror and there is terror and there is sadness all in that scene.
When I actually saw the action being done, it actually kind of disturbed me. It was a little bit crazy. It was a little bit off there. It was out of the way. I'm glad I did it. It only took 1 or 2 takes to do it. And my mother, she watched the rough cut, and she had nightmares for about a week and a half. And she just continuously tell you, like, what were you thinking? What were you thinking when you were doing that? I was just thinking that I needed to make a good take.
Well, it was super hot, and we filmed in an old building, which was very warm. I ended up being wrapped in saran wrap and put on a metal table where I had to lay for hours in the heat. And yeah, so that part was pretty miserable, but it was a lot of fun, getting to scream and work with Angela Denton, who I adore. So we had a good time. We always have such a blast on set,
On the day that we shot with Brigid, man, there was like 0 to 100 miles per hour in no time.
You gotta go somewhere else inside your mind when you're doing, one of those brutal, death scenes. You're dying. I want it to be believable, like I'm screaming for my life. I wouldn't be too worried about my throat hurting or, so you just let it go. And it was so much fun, God, to let it go, it's just like a giant release. It was incredible.
These are things that if you don't have pros, it's really hard to direct. You can't direct someone who's just casually interested in playing the victim in a slasher film like that. You have to cast someone who is committed. It's easy to cast movies like Deep Dwellers and Headless aside because they're schlocky, they're exploitation. But man, the actors that we had involved in those movies gave everything.
This film really talks about how sex is violence. And that's a very important theme of Found. And Headless and Deep Dwellers both play a wonderful part of that.
Switching us around in personality-wise. I did a few cameo spots.
Sorry.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, lay down, Oreo.